my God, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back today. Today is a really exciting episode because we're going to be talking about invertebrates. I don't even know how you say that right. And we're going to be talking about little termites. We're going to talk about bugs of all kinds. We're going to talk about ecosystems. And today we've got Professor Dr. Cecilia Dahlsjö. Why don't you say your name for the people at home?
Cecilia Dahlsjö. But you're doing great. Thanks for having me.
Everybody at home practice, in front of a mirror trying to get that name right. And I don't think anybody will be able to do it. So it's a Scandinavian name, right?
Yeah, it's a Swedish name, but I live in the UK. I've lived in the UK for the last 15 years. So I'm quite used to people butchering my name. So it's fine.
All right. Yeah. Well, I'm also a foreigner. I'm in Germany. So, people they call me Jeffries. It's Jeffries. It's So
What did I say? What did I say?
Jeffries.
Okay.
Herr Jeffrey. Yeah.
That sounds great.
It's a love language, I tell you. So you're an ecologist. You studied ecology, which is what? What is that?
Ecology is how the world works, basically, how the natural world works, how everything is connected, biodiversity, plants and animals, how it's all interconnected to create the habitats we live in.
Interesting. And so that's a study of. Okay. And you specifically picked invertebrates. And I know we talked about this before. What led you to want to study these little creepy little crawlies?
Oh, I actually didn't start out wanting to do that. It was a bit of a fluke. So I did my undergraduate degree in zoology. I've always been interested in nice, cute, lovely animals. When I was little, actually, it's not just cute animals. When I was little, I used to save earthworms. So my mum was digging in the garden and I came out to sort of have a look. And then she'd accidentally, because as you do when you're gardening, she'd accidentally cut an earthworm into two, which isn't great. So that made me really upset. So I got out, I don't know how old I was, like maybe 6 or 7, but I got it out and I put a little plaster on it and put it in a little tub with soil, and it lived there and it got better. And I let it out and it sort of continued surviving. So I've sort of had an interest in invertebrates, I suppose, for a long time. But when I went to university in my second year, I signed up to do volunteering at the Natural History Museum in London, which is this amazing, iconic place. And I thought, doesn't matter what I do, as long as I can do something great and just be in this iconic place. And the first day on the job, and I didn't know what I was going to do, they took me up into this little obscure tower somewhere where there was a laboratory, and they sat me down and said, you're going to identify termites. And specifically what I had to do was I had to look and dissect out the termite gut. And I don't know if you know how small a termite is, but it's tiny. It's only a few millimeters long. And I had to dissect this little gut out, a valve in the gut, to see which feeding group it belonged to. So you can tell, depending on the sort of structures of that valve, what they feed on. And they feed on everything from wood down to very, very humidified and decomposed soil. So that was my task. And obviously you have to do that using the microscope. And so I started looking down, and it was just this beautiful creature that, came up in front of me, and a whole new world opened up. And so I've just been so fascinated ever since. And then I went on to do a PhD on termites and sort of linked to how ecosystems function. And I do other things than the invertebrates, but those are the ones that I'm sort of mainly interested in, understanding how invertebrates impact on ecosystem functioning and that kind of thing. But yeah, no, it was quite an experience, and I really wanted to start studying birds and that kind of thing. But so it was a bit of a fluke going into invertebrates. But there we are.
So now that you're a professional and you've studied a lot, so did the thing with the worm, you made him a little cast or something. Did he get better? Were you helping?
So it's interesting that you say he, because I just picked up on that. So earthworms, not to go down into too much of a rabbit hole, but earthworms are really, really cool. So they have both female and male pores. So they're both female and male. So they have both organs.
Aww.
So they're not male or female. They're hermaphrodites. So they're both. And in Swedish, we have a word for that. We call it's HEN. It's a mix between he and she. But in English, I don't think there's too many words for that. But to go back to the cast, it wouldn't have worked had the worm been cut at the head end. So with earthworms, I wish I had one here so I could demonstrate, but earthworms are quite long. So you've got the head end, and that's really cute. Like if you look at them under the microscope, like you see the mouth, and they've got personalities, and it's amazing. And then you've got male pores that look a bit like sort of nipples. And then you've got this sort of band around the middle. And I think that you must have seen that. And if you look at an earthworm, that's quite striking. If they don't have that, it's a juvenile. Even if they do have that, it's an adult. But the band around the middle is called the saddle. And on the saddle are the female pores. And they look different depending on the species and that kind of thing. But so the pores are in different places. And had it been cut on the top end of the saddle, so where the head end is, it wouldn't have survived. But if it's just cut around the tail, which is the other end, so a small bit of the tail can be cut off and it will be fine and it will survive. But if it's cut further up, they basically bleed to death. And there's actually a myth going around, and it went around when I was little, in that you could break earthworms apart and they would just survive because they kept crawling. The reality is that they don't survive if you take too much off, and they do bleed, so they will bleed to death. And so even if they crawl for a little bit, they won't crawl for very long. So please stop doing that.
Well, now I'm sad.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm the type of person that will run into traffic to save a worm. Asked my wife, I'll go run out there in front of a bike trail and make sure that he gets across the road safely, because they're magical, right? What they provide an incredible usefulness to our environment, right?
Absolutely, they're really important. I don't know how much you want to talk about earthworms, but I can go on all day.
I can't believe that that's my spirit animal.
Oh, is it? Oh, that's nice. Which one? Because there's so many.
The big ones that drink. The big ones that like coffee.
Yeah.
Well, around my house, they poop, and the poop comes up through the dirt, and you get all this like wiggly, silly string looking stuff. Is that like good fertilizer? Can I use that?
Yes. Oh, that's really good soil. It's basically just soil. So the ones that you just described, they're called anisic earthworms. And they are the largest earthworms in Europe that we have. And they have vertical burrows that go up and down the soil. And that's quite different from other earthworms. So there's endogeic ones that live horizontally in the soil, and then there's the epigeic ones that live on the surface. And they're very small. And so the anisic ones that you talk about, they go up and down in the soil. And the reason that you see these, they're called casts, the earthworm poo on the surface, is because that's where the burrows open up. And so they go up and down. And what they do, they actually feed on sort of dead organic matter from the surface. So they feed on either the decomposing leaves off the surface, but also the material around sort of grassy roots and that kind of thing in pastures. So they will come up to the surface, pull things down and feed on it, and then they will discard their feces on the top. And that is basically just very well decomposed organic matter that is high in nutrients because it's been decomposed even more.
Wow.
And the reason it's so nutritious and rich in nutrients, and it's not just rich in nutrients, so there's a difference because it's rich in available nutrients. And that means that if you've got a piece of wood, for example, a piece of wood has very large, very complex molecules of sort of as an organic matter. And then as that wood is decomposing, those molecules break up into smaller, more simple molecules. And at the very end of that decomposition, it's basically nicely decomposed soil. And that means that the nutrients that you had in the wood pile, the decomposing wood, the the nutrients are now in its most simple form, and they therefore can be diluted and dissolved in water for plants to be able to take up. So in that poo soil that you found from the earthworms, the nutrients will be more accessible to plants than they were in the form that the earthworm ate. So they're brilliant.
Yeah. And they're so cute. Well,
they are cute.
And somehow every time that I talk with Dr. Cecilia, we end up talking about poop. And it's just our favorite thing.
It's what makes the world go round.
Well, last time we talked about dung beetles too, and you're actually saying that they don't just eat the poo, they live in it.
They live in it. They rear their young in it. It's just a great party.
Yeah, I would say you could just live in your apartment and also eat the walls when you get hungry.
Which is brilliant because not many people or many individuals or species want to do that. So they're really taking one for the team. And by them doing that, they're obviously reducing parasites and they're taking that dung away by eating it and feeding it to their young. So they're really taking it for the team, I think. So they're really good.
So they're looking around at all the other creatures in the forest saying, nobody wants to eat this? No, you don't? No, you? No, okay. All for me.
All for me? Oh, great. Exactly.
So when you studied these ecosystems, especially in the forests, right?
I mainly focus on forests, yes.
Tropical, subtropical, which are all forests?
I started off in tropical forests. So my PhD was in the Peruvian Amazon. And I've then sort of moved around a bit, mainly in the Amazon. But now I mainly do my work in the UK, so more on European woodlands and ecosystems. So yeah, I've moved around a bit for sure.
And what can you say about the comparing of the creatures you find in the British forest versus like a Peruvian Amazonian forest?
So I'd probably say that they're a little bit less vicious in the UK. There's less of them for sure. But it was really interesting because I'd done so much tropical field work sitting in these tropical rainforests and being really attacked by things. And I was thinking, when I moved on to doing more UK-based work, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be great. There's not going to be any invertebrates and it's going to be, nothing's going to sting me. Nothing's going to be buzzing around my head. It's going to be amazing. And then my first time in the field, I was like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. There's just so many insects. And I was just literally, so it's really interesting because in the Peruvian forest, I was absolutely covered in the stingless bees, which was absolutely disgusting. And you really just have to sort of focus and almost go into some sort of meditation to make sure that you're not just freaking out because they're just all over you. So they were quite abundant there. And obviously you have the ants that sting and bite you and more nasties than that. But in the UK forest, particularly where I work, there was just so many flies. So there's like everywhere you looked was just flies everywhere. And there's like the big flies. And I'm not a speciesist, but I don't know. There's some flies I don't like. And it's like the big sort of, I don't know. There's a species here we call a blue bottle, I think. I don't like them, but it's sort of those. It's like the common house fly sort of flies. I'm not too keen,
no.
And I feel really bad for saying that because I should like all species.
There's some doctor out there right now who studies flies who's saying, you don't know what.
I know, right? So I feel so bad because they're great, but I just not sure. But there's lots of them, and there's lots of ticks and mosquitoes and that kind of thing. So there's still things.
Well,
so
you know how they lay their eggs and stuff, right?
Oh, don't. Yeah. Let's not talk about it.
The truth is that there's this thing called the toad fly. I don't know if you know about that. I'll just say this briefly because it is disgusting. But they attach themselves to poor, unsuspecting frogs and toads and like stick their little eggs on there. And I found one in the forest and I had to save him and I brushed him off and stuff. But once they're in, and they kind of just take over the parasitic creatures and stuff. That's so gross.
Yeah.
Have you studied kind of stuff like that before? Have you seen some?
I haven't studied parasites. I just find them it's fascinating. I just find them quite creepy. I mean, in the rainforest, for sure, I went around and I saw quite a lot of invertebrates, so insects and things like ants, like very large ants that had gone all the way up, the ones you hear of. They've gone all the way up to the top of the vegetation, and then the fungus that has like taken over their brain is like sprouting. So I've got some nice photos of that. But that's really scary. That's really scary.
Yeah.
And when I was doing my degree, we learned a lot about like parasites that went into like horses' guts and things and just takes over. And let's move on.
Yeah. Not only is it
I feel so queasy.
like the manipulation of your body with somebody else, like working the controls. It's really disturbing. Right? I can't get over that. Yeah. Let's move on. Jeez.
It's not great, is it?
Whoa. So you've studied lots of different other bugs, obviously, and you like termites. Termites are good friends to you. Are there other bugs that really got to, capture your heart?
Oh, so yes, I really like termites. They're great. And obviously we have talked about earthworms, but they're also my it's my second love probably, because termites are really good, but they're mainly present in the tropics and the sort of subtropics, because they're really affected by disturbance, but also colder climates. And so in the European setting, earthworms are basically the European termites for decomposition and that kind of thing. So they're really my European love of sort of invertebrates. And then I really like spiders. I think the spiders are great. I think large spiders, I get a bit freaked out when they crawl on you and they're really large,
Sure.
But I think they get a really bad rep. And also spiders, but also like bees and wasps, maybe wasps in particular.
Oh, you like them? Well, they're mean to me. What other bugs do you really like? Which ones are misunderstood, maybe?
So that's really interesting. So I really like invertebrates that are not that commonly liked. So, for example, mosquitoes. Do you like mosquitoes?
I hate them.
Well, there you go. What about horseflies?
I don't like their big teeth that bite me.
Exactly. And so I think that they're really misunderstood, because both mosquitoes and horseflies are actually really good pollinators. So we actually really need them. Like, they're really good pollinators.
Huh.
And if you think about it, so they do take your blood. That's fair enough. And I don't like them taking my blood either. But it's only the female of both these species that need a blood meal for their young. So they're only actually taking it for their babies. And the male horseflies and the male mosquitoes, they don't bite at all, because they don't need it, because they don't need to feed their babies. And so they're just pollinators and making sure that, reproduction goes ahead. And so it's actually quite a small proportion of these individuals that actually bite you, but it's just that there's so many of them that it feels like it's all of them. And therefore we feel very negatively towards all of them, when in fact, not all of them are like that. And I also feel like I really feel for the horseflies, because mosquitoes, they're really, they sound really annoying, but you can hear them coming. And when they bite you, you can't particularly feel it. Like, sometimes you can when they're not very good at it, but they put this little injection in, which makes sure that, your blood doesn't coagulate and that kind of thing, so they can bite you again. And so they're very sophisticated. They've really developed a sophisticated way of biting, which makes them really successful. But then you've got the poor horsefly. And I really do mean the poor horsefly, because, if you've ever been bitten by a horsefly, you know how incredibly painful it is, because they're just not very good at it. So they're a bit more sort of primitive in their ways. So what they do is they have these so invertebrates have different mouth parts, And both of them are flies. So mosquitoes are flies too. But they have this, like, whatever you call it, like a needle that goes in, which is really good. But the horseflies, they have these like slicing mouth parts, and they basically just come in, and it happens so quickly you don't particularly notice. It just like really hurts. But they come and they slice you open. They slice your skin so you bleed, and then they're like licking it up. And I was like, that's like a massive effort. A, it's a massive effort, and B, it's really going to hurt. And so the host is going to really notice. And so because of that, you probably, you can see a horsefly landing on you and like, oh, what's happening? And then you can kill it really quickly. So I really feel for horseflies because they're not very sophisticated compared to, for example, mosquitoes. And also because not all of them need that blood meal, but you feel negatively towards all of them. So yeah, I would say that misunderstood invertebrates I quite like. I just like being that champion. And I don't like them biting me, but
No.
I understand. I understand, and I don't have any negative feelings towards
But
them.
you have this sympathy for them, like if a pug or a chihuahua bit your ankle, you're like, oh my God, look at he's cute, he's horrible at attacking me.
Yeah, well, pugs, they can't breathe. So I just feel sorry that they're alive at all. But,
This is another sign of human stupidity through breeding practices. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another conversation.
Everybody out there, if you have a purebred dog, you just don't. Okay, stop with the purebred stuff. I mean, you wouldn't let humans do it, right? You don't want your sister to be your cousin and your grandpa to be your dad. Then don't let animals do it. Yeah, that's another big conversation.
That's another conversation.
But we're talking about bugs today. And so spiders, this is another beautiful creature. Why do you like them so much? Are they because they're a loner? Because they have a purpose? What is it about the spider's personality that?
My house is full of spiders, and I don't have flies or mosquitoes. There we are. They're my friends, and I have them in the bedroom. I have them everywhere. And my daughter, who is a year and a half, she will run up to a spider now and she will point at it and she wants to cuddle it because we are very friendly towards our spiders. And when there's the big house spider, which is, massive legs, massive body, it's fine. I'm leaving it. But if it's like near my pillow, maybe not. And so then it will be taken out. But we don't kill spiders for sure.
What's your policy on shower spiders? Do you just shower with them and soap them up real good, or do you take them out before you start, or because it's dangerous for them too? But
yeah. No, it depends on where they are. If they're in the ceiling where they're not going to be affected, leave them. But if they're in the shower with me, then I will very carefully put it outside, depending on the temperature. If it's too cold, I'll just put it in the bathroom somewhere else.
Very good. See, these are the kind of friends I want to make, are people that treat spiders with the same dignity that I do. I'm also somebody who respectfully moves them to a safer area.
Yeah, I think it's nice.
Right.
I think it's nice to be nice.
I have a few in here. I got Henry, Bill, and Henrietta. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got Alan in the corner there, so he's doing great.
The bigger they get, the furrier they get, and anything that has fur, of course, it's just adorable.
And cuddly.
And cuddly. So when you got your kid wants to pet the spider, do you do it with like a Q-tip, or how's?
So no, I don't let her cuddle it now because she's, even with like dogs, she's a bit rough. So we're at the stage now where we're trying to teach her to be careful. And then once she is careful, whenever that is, she can pet the spider.
Work your way down to the more fragile animals.
Yeah, I think they're a bit. She's not careful enough to handle something that's so fragile, I think.
Takes a while to learn stuff like that. Well, start her out on a polar bear or a grizzly bear, and then work your way down.
Yes.
But you spent time in some really dangerous places. I want you to tell this story because it's amazing. There's two stories you told me last time. One is you nearly died, not even realizing it, getting stung by what was it, and where were you?
Oh, no, this is just talking about the importance of acclimatizing to wherever you are. It was my first time in the proper tropics. So I'd been to Honduras before, but that was up in the mountains. And so it wasn't nearly the same amount of invertebrates, insects, and it wasn't as hot. So I didn't really know what I was doing. But I thought, because I was quite young, I've been to the tropics, I know exactly what it's going to be like. And so I came to the Amazonian rainforest in Peru, my sort of first week, and I just went completely red everywhere, completely. My hands and feet were so swollen. And I think someone commented on my feet being completely red and like balloons. And I was like, yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. And then about a week or so later, I was just lying in bed with a really high fever, and bearing in mind that we were a several-hour boat trip from the nearest town, the nearest hospital. So it's a bit worrying. And I sort of went to hospital, and actually I don't think I was dying. I had a really high fever. My skin was really, really sensitive to the touch. And like lying there being really ill and trying to communicate this in broken Spanish is a bit of a feat. But I think they understood, which was good. And they took some blood tests and things. And I think I ended up just having a really bad allergic reaction to the number of bites that I'd had in the last couple of weeks, because I'd obviously gone from the UK or Sweden or wherever I came from to the middle of the rainforest, being bitten multiple times an hour by mosquitoes, this, that, and the other. And I think my body just had an overload of poison, basically, which it is that they sort of inject you with. And if you're not used to it, you have a really severe reaction. So I don't think I was dying, but it wasn't great. But I haven't had it since. And I think that your body just gets used to things like that. But yeah, I'd say to anyone who's going out there that it's not as romantic as it looks, for sure. And if you're worried about invertebrates or insects or anything, don't go.
Yeah. I asked you have to get prepared normally if you go to a tropical region. They want to shoot you for dengue and.
Yeah, I don't know if there's vaccines for dengue. It would be great if there is. Well, but yeah, no, I had all my shots. I had like rabies and Hep A and B and all those things. And I was eating malaria tablets and that kind of thing. So I was doing it a lot. But
was there a part of you that thought it was malaria?
I'm not sure. I was just so poorly. I don't know if
I don't know where I was.
Well, exactly. I think that one of the women in the camp thought that I had dengue, so she was quite worried. So that's probably why I went into hospital. But yeah.
Well, the fact that you went to a doctor nearby down there, did you ever find out for sure what it was, or did you just assume at the end that it was?
Oh, it's such a long time ago now. It was about 10 years ago. From memory, I think because they took blood tests and things, I think that they did conclude that it was an allergic reaction. I think it was put on some antihistamines and things like that, I think. But it's a really good thing that the human brain forgets things, because otherwise we wouldn't do it again.
Every day I read the news in the morning, and by the nighttime, thank God I've forgotten some of it.
Well, exactly.
So where else have you been? Name all the places that you've been that you really...
that I like?
Yeah. Or that were maybe a little dangerous.
So the story I just told you, I felt like it wasn't too dangerous. But that's probably because I came out of it okay, right? The one where I felt the most scared was in Kenya, and we were only there I think we were probably there for a couple of weeks. I'd been to Ghana before. This is with work. We're sort of doing field work and doing termites. And so obviously all the countries in Africa are not the same at all. But I sort of thought that, I've been to Ghana and I really like the people and stuff. And I went to Kenya on this field trip, and we spent 2 weeks in the Masai Mara, which was completely different to where I'd been before. It's the Savannah region, and it's really open and really big and completely different termites to what I was used to. So that was really nice. And I really enjoyed that. But I was working with the Czech University, the University of Life Sciences in Prague at the time. And my boss was pretty reckless, but it wasn't his fault at all. We had a driver, and we just went into this area. And what we did all day, every day, was drive around in the Masai Mara, look for termites, dig for termites, sample some, and then go back to camp. And so we were driving around and we got to this area and we're like, yeah, this looks good. I went for a pee behind the bushes, as you do, hoping not to be seen by the guys. And then coming back, they were digging away and there's this car coming. And we're like, okay, what's that? And these 4 or 5 authoritative people, like in military clothes, came out. And they're like, what are you doing? And we're like, oh, we're just digging for termites. And they were like, well, do you realize that you're on military ground? And we're like, well, are you actually kidding me? And we're like, we're really sorry. Like, and at this point, I'd just been peeing behind the bush. And I was like, and I just looked up and I saw this watchtower and people standing there looking out over us. And they'd obviously been able to see me behind the bushes. And so it's just, A, it was really embarrassing. And B, it was just quite worrying because obviously I think the driver got a little bit worried because he was from Kenya and he was, whenever anything happens, you sort of look at the local person and you see if what their reaction is. And if their reaction is not good, it's probably not good. So we got taken. We were like, okay, we'll drive behind you. And they're like, no, you're not driving yourself. You're getting in our car or we're driving your car. So they didn't even allow us to drive our own car. And we get about 20 minutes drive. I was like, where are they taking us? We end up in this military camp. And we basically spend 6 hours with them interrogating us, checking every single item in our luggage, checking us over as well. So I had to have a female military person coming in and like checking me over and making sure that I wasn't hiding anything. They were checking all the photos on our cameras to make sure that we hadn't taken photos of this military place. And we were just sitting there thinking, oh, we were just looking at termites. And then they were, I don't know if they were still a bit hesitant about us because we all had to go in individually to give these statements to make sure that we're all telling the same story and there weren't any gaps in the story. And at the end, they're like, okay, you're digging for termites, were you? A bit sort of, you piece of shit. Show us what you've
termites.
got. Termites, right? Show us what you've got then. So we had to then, on the spot in this military camp, have a bit of a look to see where we could see signs of termites. And these were termites that don't have like big mounds. Specifically, what we were digging for then was these odontotermes that have fungal combs, but it's like really deep in the ground. And you only notice because of the surface, it's a bit sort of undulating. So we thought, oh God, okay, maybe there's a termite mound underneath this little patch of ground. So we started digging. And all these people come gathering around being like, okay, we'll see if you're telling the truth. And we're digging and we're digging and we're digging and we're not finding anything. And we're probably about 1.5 meters down, 2 meters. And we've probably been digging for like an hour, sweating away, being like, oh my God, if we don't find anything, we're probably not going to be able to leave. We're going to spend the night in Kenyan jail, freaking out a little bit. So we were sweating away, digging. And finally, we find this fungal comb and we're like, thank God. And we could then show them. And then at that point, they were like, okay, we're thinking you're legit. But this whole 6 hours, you're trying really hard not to act suspiciously. So you're like trying to like joke with them, like maybe give them some food, like be really friendly. But at the same time, you're like really worried that something is, you're not going to be able to leave. And so I think that while the hospital visit was a bit scary, at least I knew that I was going to be able to leave at the end of the day, and we didn't spend the whole day there. So I think the Kenyan experience is probably something that's my worst experience so far, and something that I really want to stay out of. So wherever we go now, we're just so careful.
Did you know? Well, you ask after this, but did you know that was there any point in time when you thought, they believe me or they don't believe me, or did you the whole time you just had no idea what they were thinking?
No, we had no idea because they were friendly, but they weren't saying anything. And they weren't saying, "Oh yeah, we believe you" or not, because throughout the whole 6 hours, they were sort of treating us, taking statements from each and every one of us. And so there was always something they needed to go through. There was always something they needed to know. And we were waiting and waiting. It was almost like a waiting game. We thought maybe they thought that we were innocent after a few hours. But yeah, like we didn't know that we were going to be let go that day until we actually were let go. So I think they also wanted to sort of keep their cards close to their chest just in case something came up and not get too friendly. They were always very nice and civil.
I guess that's how it is. They're not going to just be, they're playing a game. It's like.
Yeah. But I was thinking, because you've traveled so much, so I was thinking, have you been through something similar with the authorities?
Oh, wait, well, oh, sure. I drove through Mexico, like I told you before, and I've driven all over, the United States for years and years. But in Mexico, I drove from the border all the way down to, the border of Guatemala, and then got sick and had to go. And 6 months of a whole trip, I was just kind of driving around Mexico, and every about, let's say 100 miles, 100 kilometers or something, there's a military checkpoint. And so you'll have teenagers in full army gear with machine guns who don't want to be there, but they, for whatever reason, there they are. And I have a car that is a piece of junk. Starts with a screwdriver. It's just like the worst, cheapest car I could find to bring it through. And it's loaded full of musical instruments. There's ukuleles and banjos and violins. And they think I'm smuggling drugs. At every checkpoint I would get to, they would be like, "What is all this stuff?" And I'd say, it's musical instruments. And one time they said, "All right, play me something." So I'm sitting there playing ukulele.
Gosh.
I'm playing an old jazz song from the 20s to a bunch of armed people. And they're like, yeah. Oh, yeah. And at the end, they all like put their machine guns down and we're like, "Oh, yeah, okay." And then sent me on our way. But that was...
So, were you nervous during that? Because you're like sweating trying to play and being like with a machine gun right next to you. It must be so terrifying.
I looked at my girlfriend at the time. I said, "Okay, you know this song. Let's get it right."
Yeah, let's get it right.
Let's get it right.
Exactly.
But yeah, my whole life has been a series of just sweaty moments where I just hope to God that I don't get killed, because also there was a time in Mexico not long after that trip where I saw a guy get murdered right in front of me at a bar in Puerto Escondido. He had gotten in a fight earlier in the day with somebody else, and we were all at this discotheque out on this peninsula. And the guy comes back and just stabs him to death in front of everybody. And the worst part was the crowd that ensued. They were flipping his body over. They didn't know what to do. They were screaming and panicking. This is a whole long story. You want to hear it? They were trying to get somebody to take this body away, and the taxi driver showed up, and they were like, "Hey, you got to take this guy to the hospital. He's bleeding to death." And the taxi driver was like, "No way, you guys are crazy. I'm driving away." And so people started attacking him and attacking his car. I'm like, I've left the bar. Now I'm across the street from the bar just watching this all play out. And then there's just like a full-on riot where they're trying to tip over this car and stuff. Well, in the background, the ambulance is coming to get this guy. The ambulance comes up to this riot of people, takes one look, and just keeps on driving.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so
do you think that the riot actually...
It was...
Otherwise, he could have saved his life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then at the end of the day, somebody came on a moped and put this dead body on the back of a moped and drove it away. Oh. And the next day they said, "Yeah, the guy died."
That's terrible.
Yeah, it's not so funny, but it was crazy. And at some point,
where was that?
That was in Puerto Escondido, which is a surfer town in Mexico, on the coast of Oaxaca. And this is famous for hippies going there and surfing and doing stuff like that. But Mexico's no joke. People get murdered there all the time.
Oh, but this is interesting because you're obviously from the US.
Yes. How did you guess?
Well, you could have been from Canada, but you don't sound too Canadian.
No.
But obviously there's quite a lot of islands there too.
Yeah. This is a common thread with people I know that travel throughout the United States. And it's not just people being completely insane and like they're mentally ill. A lot of Americans are just mentally ill, but they're armed to the teeth, which doesn't help. But the real thing is the police. The police are the scariest people you could ever hope to run into when you're in America. And especially in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a shame, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I've had so it's very interesting, and I think this is possibly a conversation for another time. But when Trump was in power and he was the president,
boo.
He was saying that Malmö, so the city that I'm born in, was one of the most dangerous in the world, and Malmö is the third biggest city in Sweden, and we do have gangs, and it's got a lot worse. And we have actually quite a lot of stabbings and shootings going on, but and it's got worse throughout the years. But obviously in Sweden, the guns are not allowed. They're really difficult to get. You can have a rifle and shoot because hunting is quite big in Sweden, but obviously there's quite strict rules about that. And there's hunting season, so you can't have a gun, you can't have a rifle all the time. But the police, for example, they're not armed at all. So they're not allowed to bear arms. And that's just to protect people so that things don't happen. But it must be the same in Germany, I think.
Moving to Sweden. No, well, unfortunately, the cops in Germany are armed and they're very militarized because the population is so high and whatever cultural they think they need it. And I've had experience with them here and they're not much better. They're better trained, better paid and stuff like this. But I've been to Malmö though. I have been there.
Yes, you have.
Yeah. And there are gangs. There are some tough, there's some immigrant gangs and then there's some white supremacist gangs. And there's pool halls downtown that are just straight up motorcycle club.
Yeah.
It looks like the Hells Angels and stuff.
Yeah. I think it just depends. I think every city has the good and bad places. And I think you just have to sort of know not to go some places. But I think it's interesting when you say that, the police in the US can actually be one of the more dangerous people, probably because of all the authority they've got, and sort of power hungry people who tend to go for those jobs. But it's interesting because when I was in Peru, I had one experience that I thought was quite scary, and it's quite similar to what you say in that the police can be quite scary because when you live in a society, police are supposed to be there to protect you. That is the whole point of them being there. When I was walking around this little town it's like a touristy town sort of on the frontiers of the Amazon, right on the river. I was catcalled and followed by a police car. So I was completely on my own. I was 22 and I looked back and I could just hear this whistling. And I looked back and it was a police car slowly following me. And I was thinking, if something happens and they are the ones that do something to me, who do I go to? Because this is the authority. So that really freaked me out. And I've never been to the US, but I can imagine that's sort of a similar feeling.
Well, you nailed it on the head when you said this kind of job attracts a certain kind of person. And it's exactly the kind of person that people like me and you will probably always be up against because we obviously both care about nature and the small, subtle, the little creatures, how we treat the littlest things in our world. It does matter. And these people are on the opposite side of the spectrum as far as being unempathetic and being more dominating and fascist and things like this. And the internet has pulled back the curtain on the idea that we live in a world where every human is the same in some way. There are people that are machismo monsters, and then there are people that are decent, critically thinking, sensitive human beings. And,
yeah.
And I prefer the nice ones.
Yes. It's nice to be nice.
It's nice to be nice. And that's coming from a doctor, everybody. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Well, this has nothing to do with ecology, but,
It's to do with the world, and it's the world we live in.
And we're talking about the most dangerous animal, because you said, "Oh, I got stung by mosquitoes and all this," but really, it's like humans are one of the most frightening things you could run into anywhere.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Okay, well, that was a great episode. We're gonna have Dr. Cecilia Dahlsjö back because she's getting better. She's she's wonderful. A wonderful human being, and we just started to scratch the surface on the kind of creatures that are out there. Is there anything you want to add before we go?
No, it's always nice to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. We'll be joining you again shortly. Everybody, take care of yourselves and take care of all the little creatures out there, especially the earthworms.
Exactly.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.